Kia ora, good evening. A good dousing of rain in parts of Southland in the last day will help ease dry conditions affecting many parts of the province, but more rain is still needed. In the past 24 hours, northwestern parts of Southland received up to 19 millimetres of rainfall, raising levels for some rivers. 45 degrees south weather service meteorologist Andy Fraser says colder conditions are forecast.
Right, we had around about 10 millimetres here in town. In inland areas they had up to 20 to 25, so over the region as a whole another very useful rainfall.
Has it been enough?
Well, we're now almost halfway to what we'd expect to be at this time of the year, so we're running roughly average for April now. Once again, I think it'll be enough to help make sure that the grass keeps growing. The growth that started up a week and a half ago just keeps going. Temperatures have cooled a wee bit, we've had a couple of sharp frosts. But I'd say this is enough definitely to help the grass, not enough to totally recharge aquifers and probably river levels yet, but definitely in the right direction.
How much more do we need?
Well, if we could end up with average rainfall this month of 50 mils, that'll be it'll start lifting the river levels back to normal levels. And the aquifers, of course, they take a long time to recharge if they've gone down. So we need really normal rainfalls for the next few months, really, to make sure we're okay for next spring.
What kind of rain? Is it different rainfalls we need for different parts of Southland?
Well, the ranges where those rivers originate generally get higher rainfalls than we do anyway. I actually haven't tracked those river levels that closely, but they probably haven't had much more than what we've had. They probably do need a more significant rainfall in those headwaters to really put them back to normal. When the rest of the region gets 10 or 12 mils, and that's great for the grass, those headwaters would ideally get 50 or 60 mils, perhaps 2 weeks apart or a week and a half apart, and that would really bump things up.
What can we expect for the next 5 to 10 days?
Okay, well, it's not going to be too bad a weekend. There probably won't be too much rain around the region at all. But as we go through next week, there's a complicated low pressure system going to cross much of the country. Should bring rain to many areas. Not quite sure what effect it'll have in Southland, but I'd take a punt and say that most areas between Monday or Sunday night through to Wednesday or Thursday will get another 10 or 15 mils, which will be very useful.
Food prices fell at 1.3% in March and are also lower than they were a year ago. That's according to the latest figures from Statistics New Zealand. Prices manager Chris Pike says cheaper fruit and vegetables were the largest contributor to the overall drop, falling 6.5%. Other groups to see falling prices, although to a lesser extent, were meat, poultry and fish, grocery food and non-alcoholic beverages, while restaurant meals and ready-to-eat food prices rose 0.2%. Food prices were also down on a year ago at 0.4% less. Concerns around a proposal to open a 25-kilometre stretch of coast to commercial power fishers in Otago and Southland was discussed at a meeting in Invercargill last night. The Ministry for Primary Industries is reviewing whether to enable commercial power harvest in the currently prohibited parts of the quota area at the industry's request. Opposition group Power to the People was behind last night's meeting and says commercial fishing will impact on power population and affect recreational fishing. The group says it's not known how many recreational fishers use the area and want those affected to let MPI know. Submissions close next Friday and any changes would take effect from October 1st. Southland's international education market brings more than $20 million a year to the region, and this is likely to rise. The number of international students studying in the region has doubled over the past 4 years to more than 860 last year, according to Venture Southland. Tourism, Events and Community Manager Rex Capel says there are around 200 secondary and primary students in Southland schools each year, and the direct impact of each student is $25,000. The Southern Institute of Technology estimated in 2010 the total impact of international students in Invercargill was more than $13 million. Mr Capel says student numbers are expected to rise further. And stay with us. After the break, we talk to Invercargill MP Eric Roy about his efforts to save the Tiwai Point aluminium smelter. Welcome back. The future of Invercargill's Tiwai Point aluminium smelter remains unclear, and Invercargill MP Eric Roy says he's concerned. He says it's something he's been working on for several months.
Very early on, about 6 months ago, it became apparent that I needed to use my influence in a conduit role so that I could talk to the various parties and say to the Minister of SOEs or Meridian or whoever, why aren't you at the table, and assist in what can we do? And the moment I started saying things in the media, they would start to say, well, can we trust this person? So I've just kept my head down and whenever those talks broke down, tried to resolve the issue and get them back to the table again. And then we got to the position where an offer was put on the table from Meridian and was turned down. I then went to the Prime Minister, and John Key, as we now know, rang Rio Tinto bosses in Australia and said, can we bridge the gap? And that was turned down. So there's been about 8 months of work. Some of that was weekly phone calls. That's what I've been doing.
Now, talking about that offer that government had made to bridge a deal, one of the criticisms that I've heard around that was that the time frame given wasn't long enough.
And I think, yeah, well, the detail, I'm not at liberty to talk about just what was offered and what the timeframes were. But I think you need to realise that Rio Tinto has clearly stated the smelter is for sale. And any long-term arrangement which the government would want to make would be with who the long-term owner is. And anything other than that is actually just going to put the New Zealand taxpayers' money onto the balance sheet of Rio Tinto if they sell it. And we're wanting a long-term solution. We're not wanting to prop up Rio Tinto that they can then sell to someone whom we don't know, who may have whatever kind of commitment to it. This is so important for Southland, we need to actually get that right.
So if negotiations that are happening at the moment don't pan out, from your point of view, what are you going to do to try and help fix this problem?
The fact that I'm on here today is probably saying that my role as kind of the broker conduit role is changed. I think that I will take an aggressive stance in two ways. One is to look for the buyers and be part of that to say we can do that. In the other event, there needs to be some work done that retains this power and these jobs in Southland. In Venture Southland, I think, are pretty well advanced with that. And there's a whole range of industries, if we've got that 3-year lag time, that we could kick into gear to retain that workforce, retain that power and those opportunities in Southland. And the sorts of things I'm thinking about, we've got a huge amount of logs go out, and timber processing is a high consumer of power. There's that sort of thing, a silicon mine, lignite to diesel, all of those options that we played around with. We need to advance, and we need to be at the table of Meridian and saying, if the smelter goes, let's hope it doesn't, but if it does, Southland is your team and we want to retain that power here, and these are the industries that we're working on. And as a minimum, I think we'd have about 3 years if the worst case scenario was to eventuate.
35% of census papers were completed online this year, with around 2 million people doing so. That figure meets the target of 35% of forms being completed electronically. At its peak on Census Day, the system was processing up to 130,000 forms an hour. This year's census cost more than $65 million, and it's expected the use of technology will save money in the future as it reduces staff numbers. Statistics Minister Maurice Williamson says the format for the next census hasn't been confirmed, but online processing will play a part. The Southern Institute of Technology opened its classrooms to a large number of extra students today for its third annual Open Day. Around 250 potential students and their parents got a taste of tertiary education, taking part in lessons, viewing lectures and touring facilities. The event had originally targeted Southland, but SIT Marketing Event Manager Andre Robertson says for the first time it was opened to an additional 4 schools from Otago and 1 from Lower Canterbury, as there was strong interest. He says this may be extended further in the future. The majority of subjects offered at SIT were available to the students today. And that's it from News Tonight. Sports here next with more from sports journalist Joseph Romanos. We'll leave you now with the week that was. Good night.
sprung out of its wealth. Surprise came out of its hiding place, tripped over a stranger and looked in his face, looked deep into his dentist eyes, selling the future from the holes in my smile. My hero had me hypnotized. Just listen to his languid voice. I rose out of my hiding place. I turned on my wireless and my heart started to race. I heard that night was